Okay, picking up where we left off. So this is the next lens. It is historical or biographical criticism. There's a quote there from Wilfred Guerin. I didn't choose the quote, it's just one that they want us to share with you. Historical or biographical criticism sees a work chiefly as a reflection of the author's life and times, or the life and times of the characters. So you have probably done some historical biographical in the past where we really look at a work as if it is a reflection of an author's life and times, what they were experiencing. Common assumptions of historical or biographical criticism. It uses the social structure or the way of life of a certain time period, and that helps the reader draw conclusions and better understand the story. So if I ask you to use historical or biographical criticism, you need to do some outside research as to what was happening in that time period, what was the social structure. Some of the books that we will read were written in different countries, so you probably would need to research that. You need to discover details about the author's life and times, so what were they going through, what were the political structures around them at that time, and then that will help you understand or put the lens on the book. The next lens is new historicism. It seeks to find meaning in a text by considering the work within the framework of the ideas and assumptions of the historical era. So with this one, you don't even really look at the author at all. You just look, what were the ideas and assumptions, in 1920? Okay, that's how we understand this book. It's everything in this book is showing us what people believed during that time period. It thinks a lot about, or looks a lot about, the political function of literature. It says the whole reason that we write books is because it has a political function. It's trying to say something. It's trying to say something about power. So if I ask you to put the new historical lens on a book, you're looking at the political function of this book. Why was it written? What's it supposed to do in that realm? It's focused on revealing the historically specific model of truth and authority. Not a truth, but a cultural construct. So what was the cultural construct of the time? Literature will tell us about ways of thinking at the time, ideas of social organization, prejudices, taboos. We'll look at it and we'll say, oh, this is how society worked at that time. They didn't believe women could vote. They didn't believe women could own land, something in that nature. New historicism is more, I think, like socio-historical than it is a delving into facts, which was the biographical. It's more concerned with the cultural constructs of society. So we have a lot of cultural constructs, even right now. You're maybe just not necessarily aware of them. One of our cultural constructs, we believe every person is carrying a cell phone, that is normal, that we will all have that is a way that we can communicate. That's a cultural construct. New historical criticism. So Keats wrote Ode to a Grecian Urn, and in his poem, if you were looking at it through this lens, you would say, where did he get the definitions of art and beauty around him? There's a picture of a Grecian urn right there. I don't really think it's that pretty, but he would have used all the definitions around him to define what was beautiful. That was a cultural construct. Oh, this is beautiful. Oh, this is what we appreciate in our society. All right, next lens, psychological criticism. This deals with the work of literature as a fictional expression of the personality, state of mind, feelings, and desires of the author. The idea is to evaluate the psychology of the character or the author and to find meaning in the text. We will read some of these where we will apply the psychological criticism because some of our authors were not all that stable. And we'll look at their state of mind and we'll say, oh, this is why they wrote this. This was their outlet. This is what they were trying to show us. Common assumptions of psychological theory. The author's psychological conflicts are revealed in his or her work. So if they are having psychological conflicts, they write it out in their books. readers can do an in-depth analysis of the characters as if they were real people. So we're going to look at a character in a couple weeks where we are going to really psychoanalyze her and look at her as if she's a real person. The reader's psychological analysis of a piece of text might analyze the author's psychological state. Okay, moving on to the next one. After psychological, we will do Marxist. I really enjoyed the Marxist social power criticism. I think it's always pretty relevant. It's based on the economic and cultural theory of Karl Marx. Karl Marx was the founder of communism, if you aren't familiar with him. Communism advocates for a stateless, classless society. He wrote the Communist Manifesto, which I have read, and if you were going to do a purist communist state, that's what he was advocating for. It deals with class struggles. This pyramid of a capitalist system, he says, has so many problems. He says capitalism, like previous socio-economic systems, will produce internal tensions, and that will lead to its destruction. So he says capitalism will always destroy itself. And if you look at the picture there, you can see at the very top, there's all the money. And then on the second level, it says, we rule you. So those are the kings, the very high up people. They're in charge of everything, and everybody else is holding them up. And then the next level, it says, we fool you. And when Marx was alive, that was people in the church. We fool you, we take your money, you support us. Then the next level, we shoot at you. Those are the enforcers. Those are the military. Those are the people who enforce and protect the people with the most money. And then the next level, it says, we eat for you, which is the wealthy, right? They're living well and being held up by the majority of the people who are at the bottom. You can see that some of them are even dead or falling down. It says, we feed you. We're the workers. In a capitalist society, the majority of the people, he said, are stuck at the bottom. Marx believed that groups of people that controlled and owned major industries could exploit the rest of the population by forcing their own values and beliefs onto other social groups. Which maybe is true, if you think about lobbyists and such. How to use Marxist theory. You focus on who has the power and the money. Find that person or that group in the book that you're reading and then say, who has the power and who has the money, who doesn't, and what happens as a result. I love putting the Marxist theory on books. Who has the power and money, who doesn't, what happens. Next lens, feminist gender criticism. It realizes cultural and economic problems in a patriarchal society. It says, when we have only men running society, we will have some cultural and economic problems. It realizes issues that have hindered or prevented women from achievement, and it recognizes that society sees women as the other to man, so the lesser. Common assumptions of feminist criticism. It says civilization is pervasively patriarchal, and it looks at the concepts of gender and says that's cultural. That's a cultural construct. Common assumptions of feminist criticism. It says the patriarchal ideology pervades writing, and only literature written by men has been considered great writing, which up until probably the beginning of the 20th century, we didn't have many female writers that could get published. Great literature, it says, lacks autonomous female role models, which probably does, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein notwithstanding. It primarily addresses male readers, it says, and it makes the female reader an outsider. Strategies for using this criticism. Consider the gender of the author and the characters. What role does gender or sexuality play in the work? How are sexual stereotypes reinforced? How does the work reflect or distort the place of women or men in society? And we'll do that. Some stories will lend better than others. Postmodern theory. This is a reaction to structuralism. Postmodern theory came after we did some formalist stuff. Postmodern theory says you can find endless meaning to everything. There is no single center, there's no single essence or meaning in the literature. There's endless meaning. postmodern versus modern theory. A modernist says, after World War I just don't know, human goodness may not be a thing. It says the belief in human goodness is splintered. Yeats, great poet, we will read this poem later, he says the center will not hold. People feel alienated from one another after World War I. People can no longer count on the unifying beliefs or behaviors. We veered away from linearity or harmony after World War I. So that's what a modernist says. A postmodernist then, after World War II, said the Holocaust and the atomic bomb says people were never good. All ideas of people being innately good were destroyed. There never was a center. There never was a sense of moral compass in people, says this theory. It stresses absences, contradictions, subtext, and an inability of language to connect one human being with another. Modernism versus postmodernism. Modernism said there's an absolute universal truth that we can understand. Postmodernism says there's no truth. Rationality by itself doesn't help us understand the world. Modernism has a little bit of disenchantment with the truth. Postmodernism says there was no truth. There never was. Everybody's idea of good and bad is their own. Many modernists think works of art can provide unity and coherence and meaning, and art will do what other human institutions fail to do. Literature will bring us together and help us find a common core. Postmodernists, they don't mind some fragmentation or incoherence. It celebrates the lack of meaning. If you think about postmodern art, you can find 10 different meanings in a postmodernist piece. Postmodern theory then says there's no objective, there's no absolute truth. This book means this to you, it means this to me. We can argue it. All right. These are my sources, different lectures that have been put together for these slides. And there we end. I've got one more lens I'll share with you in class, but now you are schooled on the lenses.